The dead don't complain, but the buildings that hold them do. 3 different funeral homes, 3 different nights, and the same tall figure that never blinked, never spoke, and never walked like a person. If you've worked around bodies long enough, you learn the rules. Don't look too long into quiet glass, don't stand in door frames, and never, ever turn your back on the aisle. This is what happens when you forget. Story 1. I was the night attendant at Bell & Sons, the small chapel with the carpet that swallows footsteps. The family had left, the casket was closed, and I was setting votives for the morning service when the air pressure shifted, the way it does before a storm. The lilies on the pedestal lifted off the stand by half an inch and stayed there, trembling. I thought it was a draft until the chapel doors eased open without touching the handles, and he stepped in, tall, faceless, coat hanging straight like it had weight of its own. He didn't walk, he hovered. His shoes never kissed the carpet, not once. He drifted down the aisle, and every candle flame turned sideways to face him, like each wick was a pupil tracking light. With one slow turn of his wrist, the threaded screws on the casket's lid unspooled themselves, one after the other, clicking onto the runner in a neat line. I tried to speak, but my voice caught like I was standing in deep water. He made a thin motion, like a magician telling you to watch closer. The rosary on the casket rose into the air bead by bead and bridged to his sleeve without touching it. The chapel bell rope started swinging on its own, giving 3 small, polite chimes that nobody pulled. Petals from the flower spray lifted, reversed, and settled upside down, as if gravity had been flipped just for him. Then the worst part. The body inside the casket floated up an inch and settled back as if exhaling. No straps, no mechanism, no trick. I backed toward the narthex, thinking I could kill the lights and break whatever show he was doing, but he slid between me and the switches without crossing the space. He raised his hand, and the exit sign unbolted itself and drifted down like a leaf. The room got smaller. In the quiet, I heard cards shuffle and realized it was the prayer cards on the register table, lifting and riffling in perfect bridges, the names reordering themselves to my name at the top. He wanted me to see it all, and then he wanted me to follow. He floated backward, the casket screws rolling after him like coins on a table, and stopped at the center aisle, waiting. I didn't go. I kept my eyes on the floor, turned my shoulders sideways, and slid along the pews to the side door. The candles snapped out as I went, like he was pinching the air where my breath had been. The last thing I saw before the door closed was the whole room rising a fraction of an inch, pews, flowers, casket, and then settling again like a held breath put down gentle. I called the director at home and said the alarm had false tripped. I didn't tell him the chapel floated. When I came back with company in the morning, everything was normal except the rosary was threaded through the sleeve of my jacket hanging on a peg in the prep room. I stopped wearing that jacket. I haven't worked a night alone since. Stories like this have been submitted by viewers who claim the Hollow Man followed them. If anything strange has happened to you, leave it in the comments. Story 2. 2 towns over at Maple Grove Memorial, I did security a few nights a week. Easy money, cameras, a walkthrough every hour, lights on timers. The building was old, new paint on old bones, and the coolers were the only doors that truly sealed. I like to stand with my back to the brick in the service hallway because you can feel the hum of the compressors. On Thursday, I learned why that's a bad habit. At 2:11 a.m., camera 3 pinged, motion in viewing room B. The screen showed an empty room, the kind that's too tidy to be honest. I rewound 5 seconds and saw him appear inside the room without using the door, mid-step, like he'd been walking through the wall and remembered to be seen halfway through it. He didn't even check the camera. He just moved until his shoulder slipped into the drywall, then his chest, then he was gone. The plaster never cracked. The feed didn't glitch. He wasn't teleporting. He was phasing, taking the path that people don't get. I grabbed the flashlight and made the mistake of standing with my back to the hallway wall while I watched the monitor on my phone. He came back the same way he left, a silhouette squeezing out of paint as if the wall was a curtain. I spun, and he wasn't in the hallway with me, but my shoulder was cold and slightly damp, like something had just passed through the exact space I took up. I moved. I kept a foot's distance from every surface and followed the cold. In the prep room, the stainless doors of the cooler were fogged from the outside. Not possible, not with the temperature differential. Finger marks drew themselves across the frost from the inside and kept going past the gasket as if the metal wasn't there. A palm-shaped blot swam through the seam, pressed through the steel, and rested on the outer face of the door. No dents, no noise. My flashlight washed over it, and the skin of the metal twitched like water. He drifted through the office door next, into the space behind my chair on the monitor, and stood inside the swivel like the chair had grown around him. I didn't sit. I backed into the center of the room and kept away from every wall, every cabinet, every door frame. He doesn't like open centers. He likes edges, seams, the parts of a building we trust to hold shape. He leaned his head through the shelf and turned it like he was listening to the wood. I figured the only place in the building he couldn't use easily was the glass. Not because it would stop him, but because it would show him. I held up the little inspection mirror we keep for checking under hearses, and for a second I saw the smooth, blank face smear across the reflection as if the mirror were a pond. He paused. The lights hummed harder. Then the mirror fogged from the inside, and I almost dropped it because I felt breath that wasn't air. That's when the cooler door popped open by a fraction. Not enough for a person, just enough for a seam. The room temperature dipped. Something brushed through my sleeve without moving cloth, and my skin prickled in a perfect outline. He didn't need hinges. He used the line between in and out. I left. I didn't run. I did exactly what you're supposed to do when the wall is the trap. I walked the center of every hallway, stared dead ahead, and never once let my back touch anything solid until the sunrise hit the stained glass and the colors pushed the shadows flat. In the morning, maintenance found 5 finger-shaped dry patches printed under the fresh paint along the service corridor, like the wall had retained a memory of where he'd passed. I asked for a job where the only walls are sky. I haven't leaned on anything since. If you're still watching, you're not alone. Most people turn this off by now. But you want to see what happens next. Maybe you should stick around. Or subscribe before it gets worse. Story 3. The last one wasn't my shift. I came because my cousin needed help closing up after a late service at Hollow Creek Funeral Home, the one with the long hallway of small viewing rooms that all looked the same on purpose. We were collecting leftover programs when the temperature slid down and the fluorescent stuttered twice. He stood at the far end of the corridor, centered under the exit sign, tall as ever, motionless. In his hand were 5 perfect spheres, each the size of a lime, black but reflective, like wet obsidian. They orbited his palm without touching it, clicking into brief lines of 3 and 2, then a ring, then a vertical stack that rotated as a unit. He didn't approach. He raised the lowest sphere and the sound in the building faded like someone turned off the world's compressor. No hum, no air return, no distant traffic. The second sphere lifted, and the corridor stretched by a step without actually getting longer, like a photo you've scrolled too far. The third sphere rose, and all the doors on both sides lost their rooms. Behind each small window was a blank gray that wasn't paint or fog, just a color that meant, not here. I said his name in my head, the name people use for him, and it didn't land anywhere. He held up the 4th sphere, and all the frames in the hallway felt like magnets. The corners thickened. My cousin tried to tug me into one of the rooms, and there was no room, only a doorway that opened into a copy of the hallway we were already in, tilted a degree off and too quiet to be real. The 5th sphere rose halfway off his palm and stopped. He was waiting to see what we'd do. He wanted us to step into the frame on our own. This is what people don't tell you. The trap isn't the prison. The trap is the choice to enter it. The hollow dimension looked exactly like our building after hours, but the clocks had all the numbers 12, the tissue boxes had infinite tissues but no bottom, and the exit signs pointed at themselves. If the 5th sphere fully lifted, we wouldn't have noticed we'd changed places until we tried to call for help, and our voices came back with our own names spoken in them. He tapped the air. The 5th sphere lifted a hair more and time thinned. My cousin's shadow stood still while he moved. I grabbed the metal cart we use for flowers and rolled it into the exact center of the corridor, wheels squealing, not touching any frame. I stepped onto it and made my cousin climb up with me. We held the inspection mirror over our heads like a shield, not to see him, but to make one more surface that wasn't a doorway or a wall. He hates centers. He hates things that don't agree to be edges. The spheres trembled. The hallway slowed. I took my phone out and turned on the camera, then covered the lens with my thumb so the autofocus tried to lock onto nothing. The square pulsed in the dark. The orb stuttered for a heartbeat, as if the act of framing nothing had jammed a tooth in his machine. We didn't run. We pushed off the wall with the cart like a slow boat and drifted down the middle until we reached the double doors at the end. They were glass. I used the mirror to catch the glass's reflection, then pushed with my shoe, never letting my body cross a frame. The fifth sphere dipped. The gray behind the side room windows flickered into regular shadows again. The hum returned, weak at first. He curled his fingers and the 5 spheres snapped back into a ring and vanished into his coat like coins being palmed. He didn't leave by using the doors. He stepped backward into the green of the exit sign and thinned out, like someone erasing a chalk outline with the side of their hand. For a second, the hallway looked longer than the building could be. Then it snapped to the right size, and the air came back so hard my ears popped. My cousin threw up in a trash can. I checked the clocks. All 12s. Then slowly the numbers bled back into place. I still have the inspection mirror. There are 5 faint circles etched in the glass you can only see in certain light, like watermarks. When I hold it up in a dark room, it reflects a hallway that isn't the one behind me. If I stare too long, the exit signs in the mirror point left no matter which way I turn. If he comes again with those spheres, I already know the rule. Don't give him the 5th click. Stay off the frames. Make the room plural. New horror drops every Hollow Wednesday. Subscribe before he finds someone else.